welcome to another episode of the CyberPod with Kash.
And Tarek.
In today's episode, we'll dive into our Threat for Businesses series and talk about security best practices. We talked about phishing last time, and this leads nicely on to how to spot a phishing email and other best practices businesses should take, especially the small businesses.
Yep, sounds good. So I guess if we start with like the common phishing red flags, right? So the big word or the big buzzword that I always throw in, not just with phishing, but a lot of cyber things, is context, right? Before you actually go into all of the different red flags and things that might indicate that this is a phishing email, the biggest indicator of a potential phishing email is the context of the situation, and stop and think about what you're being asked to do. Like I said in the previous episode, it's probably going to be one of two things. It's either some incentivization, something good has happened and you just need to do this step to get that reward, or something bad has happened and you need to do this. You need to take urgent action. And if you don't take urgent action, this terrible thing is going to happen. So those are the two most likely triggers that you're going to get from a phishing kind of attack. And so one of the things that threat actors are relying on is people making those snap decisions, right? They're panicking, they're busy, they don't actually stop and think about that context. And one of the big giveaways with a phishing email is often there is a unrealistic level of urgency attached to it, right? It's You need to give me your bank details in the next 20 seconds or we're going to close your bank. Or sorry, not 20 seconds, that's a bit too crazy. But you've got 3 hours to do this, otherwise we're going to close down your bank.
Yeah.
And you're panicking. You're like, okay, I need to give them my bank details. I need to sort all these different things out. It's all going to be chaos if I don't. Or your account's about to be locked and every file is going to be deleted.
Yeah, urgency or aggressiveness is another one to look out for.
Yeah, it's the tone, and you've got to think in these scenarios. It could be a bank.
Does it sound professional?
Yeah, it could be a bank that's contacting you. They're not going to be talking to you in that way. Are they talking to you in a professional way? Because ultimately, they've got to cover their own backs here. Every piece of communication that bank sends out is screened by legal.
Or things like they said, "Hello, Mr. Tarek," but why have they not used your surname?
Exactly. There's no degree of unprofessionalism from that aspect. They're making sure that they've dotted the I's, crossed the T's. Every piece of communication that they send out, they make sure is legit, right? The grammar's good, the spelling's good, it's professional and it comes across well. So if you're getting this email, the tone sounds off, there's weird spelling, they're not using my name or they're using my name weirdly. Something's off here. The context doesn't seem right.
Put in your full name, including your middle name, or they're using your email address.
Yes.
As your the Tarek at the GF9.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into those like key flags we get, right? So if you start with the first one, the suspicious sender address. So whenever you get the email or the text or whatever's come through, looking at who's this actually come from. One of the easiest things you can do in a phishing email, obviously side note, back when we used to work together in those days, we had a kind of loose office-based policy around security awareness. And we would try and encourage good security awareness within the organization with essentially having free reign at trying to deceive people in the office. So we would send each other messages. We would work on scenarios of, okay, I'm going to try and disguise a link. I'm going to use a link shortening technique, or I'm going to disguise who's sending you this message to try and get you to click on something. Mm-hmm. And it's all in the name of good cybersecurity hygiene, ultimately.
And it made it fun.
Yeah, and it's a good fun way to actually work on it that way. But ultimately, one of the easiest things you can do, I've seen people do this on Facebook, change their name, and then send a message to someone, and they go, this person's just sent me a crazy message. Or on your email account, changing the actual name of your profile to Barclays Bank.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, Barclays Bank has just emailed me. This is important. Then you check the actual sending email, and it's some personal Hotmail account.
Which can be as simple as hovering over the sender, or in some cases clicking the down arrow in the corner.
Yeah. So most of the time, you're going to see the email as it first appears, and it's going to look like it's come from someone legit. It's come from who they says it is. you hover over that email, and that can be a really clear, immediate indicator that
Tarek 0000357 Gmail.
yeah, it's definitely the comms account for Barclays Bank. So yeah, I think that's usually something that straight off the bat could be a really positive indicator that this is not genuine.
And I think jumping onto the second point there, we've mentioned it a few times already, but it's very important. It's the language.
Yep.
Is it urgent? Is it threatening? Because usually it's that urgency is a big element in phishing. They want you to take an action immediately, whether it's to claim a prize within 24 hours or enter your bank account details or your account will be locked within 24 hours. That urgency element is always there.
Yeah, because if you stop and think about it, or if you take your time, go, I'm going to just log into my account and, there's probably going to be something inside my account to, correlate with this. If you go and take some extra steps, you're probably going to figure out that this isn't genuine. They're relying on urgency. So you're not thinking straight, that you're not double checking.
You make a mistake while you're rushing.
Yeah, exactly. And then that next point is all about misspellings and bad grammar, right? We've got to think with this, because it's such an easy attack vector, it's literally sent, like, if it's an email, most people are capable of sending an email, right? It's one of the basic skills that most companies will expect. They probably won't even put it on a job description. They will just expect that you know how to send and receive emails. It's as easy as saying, okay, I want to target this person with an email. I can write an email with whatever content I want in there to try and achieve my goal. And so because so many people can do this, it's so easy to put together this content. That's almost a giveaway, is if it's not coming across professional, if it's not consistent, if the formatting's a bit off, if it's, it's not, it doesn't seem like this is a genuine thing.
I know it's not fully in line with what we're talking about, the key points, but I think this may reduce now with AI coming in and people using ChatGPT to write their phishing emails.
Yeah, and it obviously it is something that people are then aware of, because when threat actors look at the situations, go, what was successful, what wasn't successful, the generic email that you sent out that was poorly put together, broken English, punctuation, grammar was a bit off, didn't succeed. But the polished email that ChatGPT put together had a lot more success. So this one, you're less likely to see, and actually often these are the ones that your anti-spam filters do pick up as well, because if they're doing any sort of sentiment or content analysis, they can start going, this doesn't look right. There's too much grammar issues here. That's raising the threshold of what might be a security issue. But yeah, that's a really big one, right? Is the misspellings and bad grammar.
Yeah. And then the other one that leads on from that is the generic content. So even if ChatGPT has been used to write the email, it's very generic. It doesn't apply to you, or there's nothing specific to say you've actually spoken to this person before. So if there's nothing personal in it, be a bit more wary.
Yeah.
And also the greeting at the top. Does it greet you how you expect it to? Does it say Mr. Tarek?
Well,
does it say Mr. Hussein like it should do if it's coming from your bank?
Yeah, and I think that feeds back into that earlier point about context, right? It's, if this is such an urgent issue, if this is a really big deal, I'm supposed to provide you with some context here. If I'm Barclays Bank coming after you and saying, right, this is a really big issue, I need you to take action now, I kind of need to be providing you with some context about your account number, maybe your sort code. It's something that, a bit more information for you to go, okay, well, they know all of these details about my account. This is probably Barclays. But if it's just, hi, Kash, and then content, nothing else about you is in that, the rest of that, you go, this is a really urgent deal, but there's no other information in there about me. This is really generic. And so that's going to indicate that this is probably one of those widespread phishing emails that have gone out. And like I said, having done those security awareness programs, you essentially put these templates together and you have filter fields, and inside that filter field drops the person's name for that email. First name drops in there, or first name and second name, email address, that kind of thing. But if there's no actual context about that in there, that could again be a clear indicator that this isn't right.
Yeah, and again, it comes back down to the point you made earlier. Stop, take a minute to think about it before you action.
Yeah, and it's a really hard point to get across because obviously business is a big deal for a lot of companies. It might be life or death to some people, but most scenarios are not life or death. Okay, there is time to take action. Unless you're in a situation of life or death, you do have some time to look at these things.
Even if it says your account will lock out in 24 hours, you got 24
but even then, right?
55 minutes.
All of these companies have service level agreements, right? So if it's Microsoft that are emailing you and saying, right, you need to log back in, do these actions, otherwise we're going to lock your account, delete all your files. They have to give you a certain level of time to do that. So it's not going to be done in 24 hours.
Or you can always recover it by going through their support or calling the bank and getting them to reinstate it. Maybe you have to visit a branch and it takes more time and it's a bit inconvenient. But
there's a way to do it.
It saves you from giving your bank details to some scammer on the other side of the world who's now robbed you of all your money.
Yeah, so if it's an email, a text message, a phone call, and they're really hammering hard on the urgency, this needs to be done right now, this thing's going to happen, that's a real, really dodgy potential scenario there. Next, it's all about like inconsistent or suspicious URLs. So often, and like I said, this is how we would do it in the office to try and catch each other out, was you can use different techniques to disguise emails. So things like URL shortening, changing what the URL appears as. So in the text, rather than having the URL appear, you just have
click here,
a click here button or something like that. And actually, then there's no dodgy link that appears there, but what you have the power of, like the same with the actual email account, with links, you can always hover over them to see, actually, where's that trying to send me? Royal Mail is contacting me, telling me to do this, but this is definitely not a virus.com. Like this looks a little bit suspicious. I don't know if Royal Mail have bought that email domain, but probably not, right? So yeah, I think it's hovering around, before you take action, really taking the time to go through the content and go, okay, what's it asking me to do, and where's it going to send me to do this action? Because that's the other thing, right? Is I've had it before where you go, okay, I can sort this out in email, right? I could email you back, but no, you need me to go to a link and then fill in some details that way. But surely I could communicate with you through this channel, but you need to take me into another channel outside of this, right? So it's thinking, where are you trying to send me? And that destination, right, is something that could also be a flag. So yeah, I think that's that one.
And then with links, the other thing you generally get in an email is an attachment. So in this case, we're assuming it's a malicious attachment, but how do you identify that? So are you expecting the attachment to arrive? Does this email warrant it? Does the context make sense? Are they talking about your account being locked out? And then there's a random attachment. In some cases, in business scenarios, what you usually get is they'll email you and say, hey, here's a PDF attachment of your this contract that you're supposedly working on, which may entice you to click on it. But were you expecting that email? Yep. If you weren't, why is somebody sending it to you? And always just slow down, think about it. Does it make sense? If you're not expecting it, it's probably malicious. It shouldn't have arrived.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I don't know if sociological is the right word, but like a society kind of thing of there's an inherent level of trust when you're behind a screen that you don't have in person. So if I'm supposed to be meeting you and in the street I bump into you and you say, I need you to do this thing for me right now, I'll go, okay, yeah, we were meant to meet up and I know you and okay, there's something to do done. If I bump into you, we don't know each other, and you bump into me in the street and say, I need you to do this thing for me right now, I'm immediately suspicious of you. I don't know you. This is a weird greeting. Like,
who are you? Why are you?
And you need something from me? Okay, immediate suspicion.
You want to borrow my phone?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Oh, can I just borrow your phone? Like, I'm just gonna go down the. No, I'm immediately suspicious of you. I'm immediately thinking, okay, he's up to something. Whereas for some reason, when I'm behind a screen, I've got more confidence. someone from Microsoft needs my attention. They need to talk to me right now. Cool. If you've got a Microsoft badge and you approach me in the street, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I'm still suspicious of you. So yeah, I think it's a weird society phenomenon. I've got to find the word for it, but essentially there's kind of some key lessons that we can summarize from this, right? So not clicking links or downloading attachments that look suspicious, right? So like you said, if you're not expecting something, why is it trying to, does that email or does that message warrant that link or that attachment in there? Verifying the sender with a separate method. Okay, this is the big one I go to because often it's going to be a bank, it's going to be Microsoft, it's going to be somebody saying to you, you need to take this action now because this bad thing's going to happen. Call them. Everyone has support on their website. They might have a chat bot, they might have actual live support, they have a phone number you can call. You can also log into your account. Because the first thing that I would do, if I got an email from Microsoft support saying that my account is going to get closed in the next 24 hours if I don't take immediate action, I'm going to sign into my Microsoft account.
And you should see a notification.
Because if I sign into that Microsoft account, there's going to be a huge banner saying, sort this out right now. And then I'll go, okay, that's a genuine email. But I'm going to sign into my Microsoft account and go, nothing's untoward in here. Everything looks fine. Maybe the email was suspicious. From a professional or business scenario, reporting the email to IT or a supervisor. Again, having another pair of eyes on something. This can be more difficult to do if there's sensitive content for you. But often, like I said, if it's a generic phishing email, it doesn't have sensitive information about you, and your suspicions are aroused. This is where getting somebody else to look at it is a really useful thing to do, and you would expect a company to have some sort of reporting feature for emails that goes to a dedicated mailbox where the security team can start investigating.
Or an email address you can forward the email to.
Yeah. And if you don't, well, within those email providers like Microsoft, Google, etc., have an ability for you to report it to them directly, and their team will look into it and contact you to say, yeah, this is a phishing email, don't click on it. Or we've investigated it, we haven't found concrete proof of it, so we can't verify either way. Next, it's all about the phishing simulations, right? So actually understanding more about your users within the organization. So what are people's approaches? We talked in the last episode about more context around these phishing simulations. So not just, okay, I sent out a phishing simulation to 100 users, did anyone click? It's, okay, what times of the day did people click it? Like, do people open the email and then delete it straight away? Do people open the email, click it straight away? Do they take some time to read it? You're understanding more information about users' habits, behaviors, etc., so that you can actually tailor your security awareness program. If users are spending time reading that email, then you know that they're being diligent, they're taking their time, they're not just clicking on things straight away. If users are immediately clicking on emails, that might highlight a bigger problem. Either it's, there's not a good level of security awareness, or they're really busy, really rushed, and actually that's a potential attack vector, is that because your staff are so busy and so stressed, they're likely to just go, email, I need to deal with this. Another email came in, I need to deal with this. And so actually it's, okay, does this identify another business problem that we can look at in more detail? And then finally, it's, providing that end user training and monitoring the improvement aligned to that. So,
Yeah, and I think the big thing between those last 2 points, they're usually solved by having a phishing simulator. And people may not know where to start with that or what to look for in a phishing simulator. So we will put a what to look for in a phishing simulator kind of guide on our website when this episode goes live.
Cool. Sounds good.
Moving on from phishing and talking about security best practices in general, I think the next thing that we go on to from here, the logical thing, is passwords. And it's crazy how people don't have secure passwords nowadays, or don't think about this nowadays, with all the awareness training that's out there and all of the high level breaches and hacks that we see on the news. But it's very, very important to have a strong password policy that's enforced on your platform. So all of your users are made to make sure the password is at least 8 to 12 characters, has a special character, has a capital letter, lowercase letter, a number in there. They change them every 3 months. Can't reuse the same password again. Can't just changed one character. So we've got
Little star on the end.
Tariq 123, and you just change it to Tariq 123 124, Tariq 125.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You should have policies that enforce good practices from your users. But sometimes it becomes difficult for a user, right? So if I have 50 different accounts for my job, how do I keep a track of 50 unique passwords? I can't without writing them down somewhere. And do not write them down on a notepad or a stick note or somewhere, or something like that. You use a password manager. And the point of password managers is you can create unique password. They usually have a password generator within them that will create a secure password for you, and then you don't even need to remember it. In a lot of cases, if it's a if it has a web browser extension, it will populate your user credentials into a site as you log in. It makes it actually easier for you to log in and out of things. So think about that. But talking about why we shouldn't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or password 1 as password T, give us a few stats.
Yeah, so a lot of security companies, do run some statistics around these kind of password choices, shall we say. And I think it's no surprise that the most common 6-string one, right, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's, I think, 23 million passwords that it comes in, right?
Wow.
But then people go, right, okay, that one's not secure, so what can I do? Okay, the second most popular one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Of course,
it's 9 digits. And then others in the top 5 are QWERTY, first 5 digits on a keyboard. Password itself. What shall I have my password? Password.
I will not forget that one.
I'm not going to forget that. And then a series of ones. And I think it's a really scary one, because you try and reason with people around passwords and they say, but it's really hard for me to remember them. So I need to remember the passwords so I don't get locked out of my account. And that's why I think your point about password managers is so relevant and useful, because people have so many different accounts. They're either going to have one password and reuse it everywhere, or they're going to pick really easy passwords to remember, so that they can actually remember across all these different accounts what password they've used.
But I think the point this leads on to is, let's say somebody creates a unique password and they're memorizing it. They're not using a password manager. The problem that tends to lead is they reuse that same password across multiple sites.
Yep.
Tell us why that's bad.
Well, this is the big thing, right? Is that once you expose a password, and a lot of password manager tools actually will identify and tell you that, okay, in a latest breach dump, or the latest breach, we found that this password has actually been exposed. So we highly recommend you to change it, because one of the reasons is, as soon as somebody finds that they've got a password for that user, so I'm looking through, somebody is looking through a dump of passwords on a dark website. Okay, definitely not me.
Thanks for saying that.
They find that your name and a password is in there. Okay, and it's associated with an account that's not particularly that useful. It might be like a health and fitness. They found your Strava account, right? But what they might then do is start trying to log into other sites with that password and seeing, okay, maybe he's reused that password in other areas. And so the example here is all around
just to jump in there. Let's say you've used that across your Outlook and now they've gotten into your email. They can now reset all your passwords because the reset links go to your email, which they now have access to.
That's the holy grail, right? If you can get into someone's email account, you can do a forgotten password on pretty much every site that they have an account for. And because the site will say, you don't have an account with us, or they'll say, yeah, we've just sent you a recovery link to your email address, and bam, in you come. But yeah, so the example is all around Uber and an engineer's personal GitHub account, right? So from this account, attackers were actually able to see inside Uber's internal repositories, which have private keys that can be used to access data stores within Uber. And these data stores had unencrypted personal information for about 57 million Uber drivers and riders. I mean, it's probably the most used like driving and like taxi app across the world, right?
Yeah,
So,
if I leave my town where I'm not driving,
Yep.
Uber's my go-to. If I've
Even,
gone
yeah.
abroad somewhere, I'll make sure I'll have Uber
Yeah.
on my phone so I can get a taxi where I need to go.
Even if I'm not getting an Uber taxi, if we're getting a taxi, I'm just going to say, we'll jump in the Uber later. Right?
Yep.
They've coined the term.
And even food nowadays, right? If you want to get some takeaway, Uber Eats.
Yeah, exactly. But essentially, with this 57 million worth of user data drivers, the 57 million Uber drivers and riders information, the attackers were actually able to download copies of this, contacted Uber, and essentially said, "We've got compromised details for your users, and we want a ransom for this stolen data." Right. So all of this comes about because somebody's reusing a password. And we talked about the scenario in phishing of it can be a way in for people because ultimately they want access to an account that can do things in an organization. And so I might have compromised one of your personal email accounts, but guess what? You've used that password for a work account as well. And so now I can access that as well. It becomes a much bigger problem. So I think, strong credential management is a huge deal. And it's something that I think a lot of people overlook because people have to remember passwords and they find it time consuming.
And we talk about password reuse. And the one thing that can, don't do it. Still don't do it. But if you have MFA in place, you do have some kind of safety, a barrier defense in there. Because let's say they try and log into your email address with the correct password, it will now ask for that multi-factor authentication code, which they don't have.
Yeah, and I think it's the very essence of multi-factor authentication. It's having that second step. It's okay, if you breach the first step, have I got something else to protect me, or is it a single point of failure? Really, really useful. But on to the next section.
Yeah, I think if you talk to IT or security professionals about anything that's not phishing related that leads to a breach, they will say software being out of date. So number 3, keep your software up to date.
On a side note, I think we talked about password management being a really annoying thing for. I think if I talk to people that are outside of cyber, family and friends, etc., managing passwords, they claim it's a really big deal. Another thing people complain about is having to do updates. Oh, my phone needs to update, or the apps need to update, or
my Mac needs to update, or my laptop needs to update. But I'll keep pushing it back.
I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
Why is that such a big deal?
And it's a big deal because it's not just new features that they're putting on your laptop. It's security controls, updates to the code that will protect your laptop. But the other thing is, let's take the Microsoft example. When they release updates every Tuesday, called Patch Tuesday, you have something called Hack Wednesday, where attackers will see what's been fixed, and then they will try and attack it on all the devices that haven't been updated the next day.
Yep. I mean, it's literally a little recipe book of, okay, there might be this problem on a few people's accounts who've not bothered to do it.
Yeah, or they didn't even know the problem existed, but Microsoft has just told them, we fixed this issue. And they're like, no, not everybody does updates. So that's our routine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a good example on this was Equifax, right? I think this was a few years back in 2017. But essentially, attackers actually exploited a web application vulnerability and managed to access 147 million users' data. And we talked about it in a previous podcast around, look, you can't necessarily stop an attack from happening completely, but you can take adequate measures to reduce the risk of it happening. And not doing your software updates is a really big example of not taking the appropriate action to reduce that risk.
Yeah.
And so this is why they had a really big reputational impact on this and a huge fine that came out of it as well, because it's very clear that you haven't taken the steps to properly secure your accounts and services. And I think, if you're talking about the basics of cybersecurity, which we touched on before, doing your updates. I mean, you're not necessarily you're not developing the code yourself. You're not patching it, or sorry, you're not actually testing or doing the vulnerability testing or anything like that. You're just applying a patch. So all that thing has been done for you.
And from a cybersecurity point of view, when we talk to businesses, if they have some level of maturity and the basic controls in place, probably one of the first things we want them to do after the policies, procedures, standards, and having antivirus or EDR monitoring is vulnerability management processes. Make sure you have a tool that scans your estate and tells you what needs fixing and what doesn't, especially as you grow as an organization and things end up in different places and different teams to look after. You need to make sure everything is up to date. If you have multiple web applications, are they being scanned for vulnerabilities and are those being fixed? So vulnerability management is huge. It's a big part of the foundation of your cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely. All right, on to the next one, I guess.
So number 4, I think, would be backups. And this isn't essentially a control to stop you from being hacked, but let's say the worst happens or you get some data that's been corrupted. You need a good backup to get up and running again. This is that safety net.
Yeah.
But if you have the worst case scenario and your business is hit by ransomware, do you have an offsite backup that wasn't linked to your network and it's still unencrypted that you can use to restore your systems and get up and running as fast as possible?
I think that's the key word you just said in there about offsite, right? Or having it in a different location, because the big problem you have when you're going to need a backup is either a disaster has happened that's outside your control, something's been corrupted, or the server's gone down, that kind of thing, or an attack has happened and some ransomware's on there, but now that data's not accessible anymore. You might have done some backups, but if you put them in the same location,
it reminds me of our story about Box Accounting, the accounting firm with backups in the local server.
Yeah, so it's all well and good from a site usability perspective. Okay, the backup's there, I can access it really quickly, and but if that server goes down, be it a technical issue or a security problem, you don't have access to that either. So I think the off-site term is the key one in there, right?
Yeah, and I think we're going into disaster recovery a little bit here, and we've got another series planned down the line where disaster recovery is one of the topics.
Yeah. So obviously, I could talk about that for ages.
Yeah. But operational resilience, dude. That's your thing.
Yeah, just a side note on it. I mean, it very much falls into business continuity and disaster recovery, and I always stress that there is a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
Business continuity is all about availability of your service, right? So it's okay. I do have a backup, and it's in the same zone, and if I have a problem with this, I can just get it back up, and it's all good. Disaster recovery is the whole thing goes down. Like, you don't have access to any of that anymore. What do you do then?
Yep.
So I think it's having that distinction of it's not just about availability. It's metaphorically has hit the fan.
Let's bring you back.
Yeah. So continuing on this topic. So number 5 is all about investing in some basic security software, right? Now, the problem when it comes to cyber is that the more and more services, solutions that you want to use, the more that bill just keeps rising. Okay, so it's very easy to say, get one of these, get one of these. You start noticing the bill creeping up. But actually, a lot of tools that you can get in this space are either on the free side or on the more affordable side. So things like antivirus, anti-malware solutions, they're essentially really good ways to have a library of potential vulnerabilities, right? So again, when we talk about updates, making sure that these tools are kept up to date is really key, because when a new vulnerability or new issues come out, that's then going to get fed in to these tools so that they're, updating their engines constantly to try and identify anomalous behavior. On the more expensive side of things like EDR solutions can be a much better way of actually securing more of the estate. But I think when it comes to tooling, it's all about doing that kind of maturity thing. So looking at where you are now and using that to sort of build your budget for what the security tooling should be, and then having a plan for, okay, as we grow or as we move into a new market or as we get more users, as we get more staff, we're going to need better security tooling. So we're going to plan that into next year's or the next 5 years. We're going to have some investment into those tools as well. Now, as the business is growing, you might think about things like you touched on vulnerability management, a 24/7 SOC, that kind of thing. So ultimately,
Security Operations Center.
Security Operations Center. Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing when it comes to tooling decisions is think about the context of what it is you're doing. So what services are you offering? How available does your service need to be? If it's just a business hours kind of thing, you need business hours support. If this is a 24-hour service that you're running and offering to customers, you kind of need 24/7 support here. Otherwise, if a problem happens at 1 a.m. in the morning, customers still need to access stuff here. So that's a big deal. You can't wait a few days, or you can't wait till the morning to go, oh, we've got a problem.
It happened on Friday afternoon, and we'll pick it up on
Someone
Monday morning.
will have a look on Monday morning.
But you're a 24/7 business. You don't stop working on evenings or weekends.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the next one here is access control, and we'll dive into this in a bit of technical detail when we talk about web-based attacks, because we talk about session hijacking and things like that. But for this specific control, it's all about role-based or role-based access control or attribute-based access control, where a user has access to do what they need to do. So don't give access to Tarek to all the company's files and folders because he's working for the organization now.
Yeah.
You give him access to the development section because he's a developer and that's all he needs access to. Or even within that, he's only working on one project. We brought him in to work on one specific project. That's all he needs access to. But an example of this, I think we had recently, it was in July this year, just a month or two ago. You may have heard about it. It was the Disney breach. They had a user who was hacked. I think the root cause was they downloaded a file on their gaming workstation, their personal gaming laptop, which they used for work as well.
Okay.
And they had Slack installed on there. The attackers got access to Slack. I believe it was a Russian hack group behind this, and this user had access to 10,000 plus Slack channels. There was no way they needed access to all of those, but it included business sensitive information, customer sensitive information, and that group downloaded everything from this user's device. And that led to a massive incident for them. It ended up with Slack losing their contract with Disney, although I'd say it was probably more Disney's fault, making sure they didn't have correct policies and procedures in place. But Slack suffers the consequence of losing such a huge contract. But if they had, we mentioned MFA, if they had MFA in place, the attackers were not getting into that Slack channel. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And I think it's probably the one I pick up the most when I do security assessments and look at people's environments. Identity and access management is a mess because people are quite scared of hurting operations, right? And they go, okay, you need access to do something. Cool, you've got access to do whatever you need to in there. And they'll over provision and they'll over give access. And then you have scenarios where actually people end up with accounts that after they've left an organization, the account's still valid. That's called a shadow account, right? So then you've got a scenario where user left 6 months ago, but they've still got a really privileged account to
make sure you have a good joiners, leavers, movers process.
Really good. And then finally, outsourcing where needed. So it would be very difficult for any organization to be an expert of everything, right? I think the phrase that I was, the compliment I was given in my first role, which was I kind of took as a bit of a backhanded compliment, was I was a bit of a jack of all trades. Obviously, the final part of that sentence is master of none. And if you are good at everything, it means that you're not the best at something, right? You can never be an expert in every different area. And so part of being a good leader and being, making conscious security decisions is knowing where you have gaps and knowing where, okay, you don't have the expertise to lead on this, so you're going to outsource that area. And so understanding that, there are, cybersecurity providers, there's managed service providers, there's tools on the market available. There's a range of different solutions and services that you can use to enhance your capability. Because ultimately you're building a security program here. And so lean on the areas that you're strong in and then lean on other aspects outside of your organization to help you with those shortcomings that you have as well.
This is probably what big businesses do really well, right?
Yeah.
They outsource work. They find security partners who will look after different elements. So they won't set up a 24/7 team to do security monitoring 24/7. They have a 9 to 5 team, and then they'll outsource the 24/7 monitoring and detection and response capability.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction in there. But ultimately, those are the different areas, right, for how you build out a secure program. And if you enjoy our content, please do feel free to share it with your friends, especially those that are in the cybersecurity space.
I think there's one more thing on this topic of outsourcing, or we mentioned vulnerability management. We talked about implementing joiners, leavers, movers processes and other security incident response plans, or finding a 24/7 team or managed service provider. Having a good security partner that can help you do that kind of work, like DGF9, can take on that bulk of work and say, okay, these are the things that you need to look at when you're talking to a security operations center about what makes a good security operations center. Is it the number of rules? Because that also means a large volume of alerts. How well are they tuned?
Yeah.
Things like that. What's the use case development lifecycle? What does that actually mean? And a security partner can help you through all of those elements and help you choose the right solution, the right partner for you, and provide that advice and guidance. So reach out to DGF9.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really valuable aspect because I think we talked about it earlier on about you won't necessarily have a full appreciation for security challenges until you have a security incident. Yeah. So if you're setting things up for the first time, it's very difficult to have that knowledge, that experience of, okay, what does good look like? And
we've touched on phishing a lot over the last this episode and the previous episode. But let's say you receive a phishing email, and they report it to your IT team. Do your IT team have a process of dealing with that?
Yeah,
a security partner, DGF9, can help you set up that process, because incident response is all about how quickly can you identify what's going on, move to contain it, and get business back to normal.
Awesome.
So, DGF9. That's the last time I'll say that on this episode.
Awesome.
But thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy our content, please do share it with your friends, especially those in the cyberspace or with small businesses. And, like we said, we want to keep this interactive. So if you do have any questions or comments that you'd like us to target in future episodes, please do add them in. But thank you for listening to the CyberPod. I've been Tarek.
I've been Kash.
We'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.